Welcome to the Brain Alpha. Have you ever wondered why so many prominent founders and financial titans, everyone from tech pioneers to the heads of major American investment firms, share a very similar cultural lineage? Well, it's definitely not a coincidence, and it absolutely isn't about genetics. It actually comes down to a survival philosophy, one that was forged over thousands of years and refined into an absolute masterclass on wealth generation. Today, we're unpacking this ancient blueprint from texts like the Talmud, and we're going to adapt it perfectly for our modern economy. Let's just dive right in. Look, the biggest question facing the American middle class right now is this. Why do some people absolutely thrive while inflation and wage stagnation are literally crushing everyone else? You work hard, you try your best to save, but the cost of living just keeps creeping up, right? Every day, the value of your dollar gets chipped away a little bit more. We're living in this highly unpredictable era where the old safe rules simply don't protect you anymore. Doing exactly what you're told is just no longer a guarantee of financial security. And the root of this problem? It actually starts way earlier than you might think. The traditional American public school system is incredibly effective at doing exactly one thing, and that's training us to be obedient employees. We're taught to follow directions, to never rock the boat, and to just trade our time for a predictable, safe paycheck. But true wealth creators? They operate on a completely different mindset. Through historical texts and teachings, they're trained from a very young age to view the world through the lens of an investor or a business owner. When they see $1,000, they don't immediately think about how to spend it. They look at it as a tool, a seed to turn capital into lasting generational assets. So today, we're breaking this blueprint down into 3 core principles: sacrificing first, taking calculated risks, and acquiring invaluable wisdom. All right, let's kick things off with Principle 1, sacrifice first. In our modern culture of instant gratification, it's honestly kind of hard to accept that there is zero success without initial pain. You just cannot get the reward without paying the price up front. Think about this ancient parable of the 2 farmers. Both of these guys were facing a brutal spring after a terrible harvest the year before, and they each had only a tiny, tiny amount of seed wheat left. Now, the first farmer just couldn't handle the immediate hunger. He caved. He ground his seeds into flour, baked some bread, and ate it right then and there. He got his immediate gratification, but he completely doomed his future. The second farmer was just as hungry, probably starving, but he endured the physical pain. He took his precious seeds and buried them in the dirt, not even knowing for sure if they were going to grow. He sacrificed his immediate comfort, and by autumn, he reaped a massive golden harvest that totally secured his family's wealth. So, the crucial takeaway here is that you absolutely must offer value before you ever expect a return, whether that's your time, your effort, or your money. This is especially true when you're networking with highly successful people. Think about how often folks want a risk-free guarantee. They say things like, well, I'll work harder if my boss pays me more, or I'll invest if it's a guaranteed win. The wealthy know that success works in the exact opposite order. If you want to connect with a successful mentor, you don't just walk up and ask to pick their brain to steal their time. No way. You figure out how to solve a problem for them first. You plant the seed, you endure the upfront effort, and you reap the reward later. Moving right along to Principle 2, calculated risks. A lot of people hear the word risk and assume it means gambling your entire life savings in Vegas. But jumping in blindly is honestly just as dangerous as doing nothing at all. To really grasp what a calculated risk is, let's talk about the story of the king's orchard. So, a king opened up his incredibly lush, beautiful fruit orchard to the public. The rule was super simple. Enter the gates and eat as much as you want, totally for free. But the exact second the evening bell rings, you must leave immediately. Anyone caught inside after that bell, executed. Well, the townspeople ended up splitting into 3 different groups. The fearful group was so terrified of that execution rule that they never even entered the gates. They totally missed out on the bounty and literally starved in the streets. Then you had the greedy group. They rushed in, running deep into the center of the orchard to find the sweetest, most perfect fruit, and they completely lost track of time. When that bell rang, they were way too far from the exit and, well, they perished. But the calculated individuals, they were smart. They stayed right near the exit, they enjoyed the feast, they kept the gates in their line of sight, and the very moment that bell chimed, they took one step out to safety, well-fed and very much alive. Look, quitting your day job to day trade with absolutely zero plan, that is wandering way too deep into the orchard. But sitting back on the couch and letting inflation slowly eat your stagnant wages, that's a slow financial death. That is starving outside the gates. You have to calculate your risks. Before you start a business or make any sort of investment, sit down and identify your acceptable loss. What actually happens if it fails? If you can survive that absolute worst-case scenario, take the risk. You gotta be in the orchard to eat, but you always need to know exactly where your exit is. Which brings us to our final core concept, Principle 3, invaluable wisdom. Wisdom is the ultimate, untouchable asset in any economy, period. And it is the absolute cornerstone of why this philosophy has generated so much generational wealth over the centuries. Picture this. A ship is sailing across the sea carrying some extremely wealthy merchants. These guys spent the entire journey just bragging about their physical treasures. We're talking heavy chests of gold, rare spices, sparkling jewels, the whole shebang. But sitting quietly over in the corner was a humble rabbi, a man of really deep learning. He carried literally nothing but the clothes on his back. When the merchants mocked him for being poor, he just calmly replied that his internal wisdom was actually the greatest wealth on the entire ship. Well, midway through the voyage, bam, a ruthless band of pirates attacks. They strip the ship bare, stealing every single piece of gold and every last jewel. When the ship finally limps into port, the merchants are completely ruined, left begging for scraps in the streets. But the rabbi? He just casually walked right into the center of town, started teaching his profound wisdom, and began solving complex problems for the locals. Within days, he was being treated like absolute royalty, fed, clothed, and paid handsomely. He looked back at those broke merchants and said, "Your wealth was stolen, but wisdom cannot be taken." This parable perfectly highlights a reality we all face today. Think about it. We might hesitate for days to spend $20 on an educational book, while we'll easily blow $50 at a bar on a Friday night without blinking. But the return on investment on targeted knowledge can multiply your lifetime income exponentially. The stock market? It might give you, 8 to 10% a year. Real estate can definitely give you a solid return. But a single high-income skill learned from a $20 book or a specialized course, that can increase your earning power by 1,000%. And the absolute best part, it is completely tax-free, and no economic crash, recession, or pirate can ever confiscate the skills inside your head. Okay, let's talk about taking action today. Because honestly, knowing all these principles means absolutely nothing if you don't apply them to your daily life. Wealth isn't generated by passively listening to this explainer. It's generated by changing your behavior. So start with these simple baby steps today. Go ahead and delete those mobile games that are just stealing your attention. Invest in an educational book about finance, marketing, or a new high-income skill. Maybe skip the weekend drinks just once to finally sit down and research that side hustle you've been dreaming about. Grab a pen and paper right now and map out the calculated risks you can actually afford to take today. So, the ultimate question you have to ask yourself is this: will you stay an obedient worker, or will you use this blueprint to finally become a wealth creator? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, and help us build the hype. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.